Hello, this is D and I'm back with another video. Well, today was a very interesting day as it appears that many outlets received their Xbox Series X. Now, I did see some testing for the backwards compatibility as well as quick resume. Now, most of the outlets were very impressed with the performance, especially with quick resume. Now, the reports are that you can switch out between 5 games in around 9 seconds each time you switch. Now, for the backwards compatibility, Digital Foundry did an analysis on the Xbox Series X and they also were left impressed with the performance. Now, you saw anywhere from a 75 to a 100% increase in performance over the Xbox One X. Now, this was just with brute force, without any type of optimization, without any of the features of RDNA 2, and I have to say myself, this is very impressive. Now, games that are locked at 30 frames per second, unfortunately, did not see any type of performance uptick. Now, this is due to the game being actually locked at 30 frames per second. The uptick in performance was in games that had an unlocked frame rate or were capped at 60 frames per second. Now, the games that were at 60 frames per second that were dipping below that on the Xbox One X, we're seeing a silky smooth 60 frames per second on the Series X. Now, some games that were struggling at 34, 45 frames per second, we're seeing a near 60 frames per second lock, and once again, this was without optimization. Now, I saw your regular suspects on social media talking about the Xbox Series X and how it can't get some of these games running at 4K 60 frames per second. Now, most of these people, like usual, they don't pay attention to the actual article or the source of the information. Now, if you watch Digital Foundry's video, which I will link in the description down below, they do state that the Xbox Series X is capable of 4K 60 on some of these games. Now, the game that they mentioned specifically was Tomb Raider. Now, this was locked at 30 frames per second, and on the Xbox Series X, we didn't see an uptick in performance, and like I said, the games that are locked at 30 frames per second have to be unlocked by the developer or Microsoft itself. Now, they went on to say that they do believe that this game can run at 4K 60 frames per second, and I think this is an excellent result for the Xbox Series X. Now, we have to remember here that all of these improvements are without the features of RDNA 2, are without optimization. This is just brute force. So can you imagine when the developers go in and actually make changes? We will get some high frame rates on some of these games, maybe even approaching 120 frames per second. Now, overall, I am very impressed with the performance. I can't wait to get the Xbox Series X. Now, I haven't played on my Xbox One X in quite some time, to be honest with you guys, because I just can't tolerate 30 frames per second. Now I'll be able to go back to some of my old games and play them again at 60 frames per second, and I think this is a great thing for all gamers. Now, why Microsoft gets such a bad rap, why they have so many trolls, I don't understand it, but all of the outlets that reported on today's story were very impressed with the performance of the Xbox Series X. Now, I told you earlier that Digital Foundry said that Tomb Raider could run at 4K 60 frames per second on the Xbox Series X. Now, after they made this comment, I went and looked at some of the benchmarks of the 2080 Ti from Nvidia. Now, this GPU kind of struggled with this game at 4K resolution. It wasn't quite reaching 60 frames per second. On average, it was anywhere from 55 to 57 frames per second. Now that Digital Foundry is saying that they do believe that the Xbox Series X could run this game at 4K 60, we are truly seeing that the Xbox Series X is a true next generation console. Now, I've said many times before that I do believe that the Xbox Series X will rival a 2080 Ti. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to beat that GPU, it just means that it's going to be very close in performance. Now, when it's all said and done, I think the Xbox Series X is going to land somewhere in between the 2080 and the 2080 Ti. And when you think about the $499 price tag that the Xbox Series X is coming in at, you know that that is a fantastic deal. Anyways, I want to know what you guys think about today's test. Were you impressed with the backwards compatibility performance as well as the quick resume? Let me know in the comment section down below, and like I usually say, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next one.